Hey everybody, welcome back.
Right after giving birth, I texted my mom, "I haven't slept in 2 days. Please come." She replied, "You made this mess, you figure it out." 3 weeks later, I got a group text, "Hey, we're behind on rent. Can you spot us $2,500? I just replied, "No. You made this mess, you figure it out." And then, right after I gave birth, I was alone in a way I didn't even know was possible. Not emotionally. Physically alone. No one in the waiting room. No one holding my hand. No one calling to check in. The nurse wheeled me out of the hospital in a wheelchair and I kept looking at the entrance thinking maybe anyone would show up. Nothing. I hadn't slept in 2 days. The labor was long, painful, and the recovery was worse. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I was shaking from exhaustion. My daughter was crying nonstop and I was so out of it. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed and just whispering her name over and over like that would calm her down or maybe bring someone to help. It didn't. I picked up my phone and texted my mom. I said, "I haven't slept in 2 days. Please come." I waited. And waited. She replied, "You made this mess, you figure it out." That was it. I stared at that message for a long time. My hands were cold but I wasn't crying. I didn't even have the energy for that. I just stared. And the thing is, it wasn't shocking. Not really. Just final. Like a door slamming shut. It felt like confirmation of everything I had been afraid of when I found out I was pregnant and decided to keep the baby. How quickly love can turn conditional. My sister never reached out either. She posted a picture of her brunch on Instagram that day. Only one person stayed on the phone with me when I called crying in the middle of the night. My grandma. She was in Arizona and too sick to travel, but she picked up every single time. Even when I could hear the oxygen machine in the background. Even when I called her sobbing at 3 a.m. and didn't say a word for the first 5 minutes. She just stayed on the line. 3 weeks later, I was still figuring everything out. The sleep deprivation had blurred the days together. I had a schedule pinned to the fridge that I couldn't even follow. I was bleeding, leaking, hurting, and still somehow getting up every 2 hours. Then I got the group text. It was from my mom, but she added my dad and sister in too. It said, "Hey, we're behind on rent. Can you spot us $2,500? Like nothing had happened. Like we were just a happy little family and I was someone they could turn to for help. Not the same person they'd left completely alone during the hardest experience of her life. I stared at that text just like I'd stared at the one before. Then I typed, "No. You made this mess, you figure it out." And hit send. 10 seconds later my phone started ringing. I didn't answer. But that was only the beginning. I didn't reply to the group text. Just sent that one message, "You made this mess, you figure it out," and left it at that. For 2 days they blew up my phone. First it was my mom calling over and over. Then texts started coming in, guilt-tripping ones. She sent one that said, "We're still your parents no matter what. Family helps each other." I didn't even open the rest. Then my sister jumped in with this long paragraph like she was doing a TED Talk on forgiveness. Said I was being petty and immature, and that I was clearly still hormonal. She even tried to say I was using the baby as a weapon, by refusing to let them back into my life. That's when I realized something. Not one of them asked how I was doing. Not once. No, "How are you holding up?" No, "How's the baby?" Nothing. Just straight to asking for money like I was some walking bank account with zero memory. I didn't reply to my sister either. Another day passed and a call came in from a blocked number. I answered by instinct. I thought maybe it was a doctor or my grandma calling from a hospital line. It was my dad. First he was casual. Almost warm. Asked how I was doing, how the baby was sleeping. It threw me off. For a second I wondered if maybe he was going to apologize. Then came the real reason he called. He started talking about how things were tight right now. Said they were in a bad spot, just needed a little help to get over the hump. He didn't even ask this time, just assumed I'd understand, assumed I'd give in. He talked like it was a favor I owed them. I told him I didn't owe them anything. That I'd asked for help 3 weeks ago when I was bleeding, exhausted, and completely alone, and they decided I wasn't worth the trouble. I said they made their choice. He switched fast. Told me I was being dramatic, said I was just bitter, and that I had no idea how hard things were for them right now. I hung up. I was shaking not from what he said but from how familiar it all felt. Like nothing had changed. They still thought everything revolved around them. Still thought they could say whatever they wanted, do whatever they wanted, and I'd just take it. That night, I held my daughter in the dark and thought about how I was going to protect her from people like that. Even if those people were my own family. The next morning my phone buzzed again. But it wasn't them this time. It was Grandma. She asked how I was. I told her the truth. I was tired, overwhelmed, angry. I told her what had happened. She listened the whole time, didn't interrupt once. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Give me 2 days." I didn't know what she meant. 2 days later she showed up at my front door. It was the middle of the afternoon, that strange quiet window where the baby was finally asleep and I was too tired to do anything useful. I was sitting on the floor with my back against the couch, staring at nothing when someone knocked. I almost ignored it. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't told my parents where I lived and I didn't have friends dropping by. I waited, holding my breath, and then the knock came again. Slower. Firm. I looked through the peephole and my brain stalled for a second. It was my grandma. She stood there with a small suitcase, a tote bag slung over her shoulder, and a ridiculous stuffed giraffe tucked under her arm like she'd grabbed it last minute. She looked thinner than the last time I'd seen her, a little pale, but her eyes were sharp, focused. I opened the door and just stared at her. She said my name and stepped forward like this was the most normal thing in the world. I asked her what she was doing here and she reminded me of the phone call. The one where she told me to give her 2 days. She came inside, set the suitcase down and looked around the apartment. The laundry piled on the chair. The half-unpacked hospital bag. The bassinet wedged next to the couch because there wasn't room anywhere else. She didn't comment on any of it. She just said, "You shouldn't be doing this alone." Then she told me to pack a bag. I laughed because I thought she meant for herself. He didn't. She said we weren't staying there. Not long term. Not anymore. She pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside was a flight itinerary. One way. Her name on it. No return date. That was the first moment I realized she wasn't visiting. She had come to stay. She said she'd been lying when she told me she couldn't travel. Not because she wasn't sick, she was. But because she needed time to put things in motion. Legal things. Financial things. Things she didn't want to explain over the phone. Then she opened her suitcase again and took out a small metal lockbox. The kind you'd keep important documents in. She placed it between us and opened it. Inside were keys. Several sets. I asked what they were for. He told me they were for the house my parents were living in. Or had been living in. She explained that the house was never actually theirs. Years ago, after my dad made some decisions she didn't trust, she kept the property in her own name. Let them stay there. Let them pretend it was theirs. She said she'd already contacted a lawyer. Notice had been served. 30 days. While my parents were asking me for money, she had been quietly pulling the ground out from under them. She told me that house was meant to stay in the family, and that if anyone was going to live there now, it would be me and my daughter. She said it like it was settled. No debate. No hesitation. I felt dizzy. I had been measuring my life in diapers and sleepless nights just trying to get through each day. I hadn't even allowed myself to think about stability. Or safety. Or help that didn't come with strings attached. Before I could even process that, she handed me another bag. Inside were baby clothes, blankets, and gift cards tucked into the pockets. Enough to breathe again. Enough to stop panicking every time I opened my bank app. He told me we were starting over. That I didn't owe anyone access to my life just because we shared DNA. That night, after she went to sleep on the couch, I sat awake holding my daughter and finally let myself believe that someone had chosen me. I just didn't know how angry that choice was about to make my parents. Because a few days later they showed up unannounced. The house had finally started to feel like ours. I had unpacked most of the baby's things, set up a little corner in what used to be their guest room, and was beginning to believe I could actually live like this. Not just survive, but breathe. Eat sitting down. Shower without worrying about someone needing me mid-rinse. It was still chaos, but it was our chaos now. Then the doorbell rang. It was mid-morning and my grandma and I were both in the kitchen. I had just finished feeding the baby and was holding her with one arm, pouring cereal with the other when we heard the chime. I didn't even have to look. I knew. Still, I walked to the window and peeked out. There they were. My parents standing on the porch like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't abandoned me. Like they hadn't just been evicted. My mom was holding some paperwork. My dad had sunglasses on even though it was cloudy. The way they stood there, completely entitled, made my stomach twist. I didn't move to open the door, but my grandma did. She didn't ask me. She just walked over, opened it wide and leaned against the frame. My parents didn't even wait for an invitation. My mom launched right into it, holding up the papers like she was collecting a debt. She said, "We still have things inside. Legal things. Tax forms. Medical records." My dad added, "And we need to talk. This whole situation is ridiculous. We built that house. We paid for the renovations. You can't just take it away." My grandma didn't respond right away. She let them talk themselves in circles. Then she said, "I've let you lie to yourselves for years. But we're done with that." She told them she'd reviewed every record. Every check, every receipt. The renovations they claimed to have paid for, he paid for them. Quietly. Because they'd asked for help at the time. That help turned into her covering their lives. Their mortgage, their car insurance, even the last 2 years of property taxes. She said they had no idea how much she'd done for them. But the real surprise came when she turned to my dad and said, "And I know about the savings account." His face changed instantly. She said, "The one with $52,000 in it. The one you've been adding to while telling everyone you're broke." My mom tried to deny it, but Grandma wasn't having it. She pulled out a folder from her tote bag. Bank statements, legal documents, everything she needed. She'd already been to her lawyer. Already had it notarized. She had proof that they had the money all along, and refused to spend a single cent helping me. I stood there holding my daughter, watching my parents fumble through excuses. They said things like we were saving for retirement and we couldn't just give it away and it wasn't personal. But it was. It always had been. Grandma cut them off. Told them they had 10 days to get their things from storage and stay away. She warned them, clearly, that if they stepped foot on the property again she would file for a restraining order. And then with zero hesitation she said, "And don't think you're touching that account. Because I already drained it. Every last dollar. It's gone." My mom looked like she was about to scream, but my dad stopped her. He just stared at the ground. They left without another word. That night, while Grandma sat on the porch sipping tea like nothing had happened, I held the baby and looked at the papers she gave me. The house deed. Transfer of ownership. Within 2 weeks the house would be mine. The only thing I didn't understand was what she meant when she said she drained the account. I thought she was bluffing. I thought maybe she just scared them. But a week later I found out the truth. And it was bigger than I ever expected. A week passed. It was quiet. Too quiet, honestly. I kept waiting for something. A knock, a text, some kind of explosion. But there was nothing from my parents. Not even my sister. It felt eerie. Like the calm after a disaster where you're not sure if it's really over. Grandma, meanwhile, acted like this was all part of some long-anticipated plan. She spent her mornings folding laundry, humming, and reorganizing drawers. At night she made tea and read on the porch. Completely unbothered. Like evicting her own kids and dismantling their finances was just another Tuesday. Then one morning she handed me a manila envelope. No explanation. Just said, "Take a look when you get a chance." Inside were bank statements. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. The name on the account was familiar. It was my parents' joint, just like she said. I flipped through the pages. Dozens of transactions, deposits, balances. Then I saw the transfer. Exactly $50,163. Cleared. Gone. I looked at her. She said they used me to fund their lifestyle for over a decade. I figured it was time they finally paid me back. I asked where the money went. She smiled and said where it should have gone in the first place. She had moved it into a private trust under my name, not directly into my account because she knew if they ever tried to come after it legally, it would be harder to touch. It was protected. For emergencies, for the baby, for stability. Not to spend wildly, but to breathe. I didn't know what to say. For so long I'd been living in survival mode, counting diapers, skipping meals, calculating which bill could be pushed another week. And now I wasn't rich, not even close, but I wasn't drowning anymore either. Then came the real twist. She showed me a document she'd filed 2 years ago before I was even pregnant. A legal amendment in her will, naming me as her primary heir. I was stunned. She said she'd been planning this quietly, ever since she saw where things were going with my parents. Said she didn't want people who only remembered her when they needed money to inherit anything. I was speechless. She told me, "You weren't a mistake. You weren't a burden. You were just inconvenient for people who didn't deserve you." That's when I finally understood the full picture. My parents had the money all along. They didn't help me not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to. Because they didn't see me as worth helping. No. They were broke, bitter, and out of options. They thought they could use me. Instead they lost everything. And it was Grandma who made sure of it. But there was one last piece left. Something I didn't see coming. Because a few days later someone else came knocking. And this time it wasn't my parents. It was one of those gray mornings where everything felt muted. Rain sliding down the windows, the baby dozing after a long night, the house quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. I was starting to feel what I hadn't felt in months. Calm. Not because everything was perfect, but because the chaos was finally outside the walls. Then there was a knock. Just once. Not loud, not desperate. Just careful. I stood up and looked through the peephole. It was my sister. She stood there in a hoodie, no umbrella, soaked from the rain. She had a small bag slung over her shoulder and that same look she used to get when she'd done something wrong but wanted to pretend she hadn't. Except this time she didn't look defensive. Just worn out. I opened the door but didn't say anything. She looked past me for a second, maybe checking to see if Grandma was going to come to the door too, then looked down like she wasn't sure if she should speak. She said, "I know you don't want to see me." I wouldn't either. I stayed quiet. She went on. Said she'd heard everything. Not from mom or dad because they were too busy spinning their own version of events, but from someone they stayed with temporarily. A friend of hers who saw it all unravel and didn't bother keeping it a secret. That's how she found out about the money. The eviction. The trust grandma set up. Everything. He said, I didn't know. I really didn't. I thought you were just making things hard. I thought you liked the drama. That one stung. Not because she said it, but because that's exactly what they'd all believed. That asking for help, that struggling through motherhood on my own, that breaking down and begging for someone to care, was just me being difficult. He told me they left town. Not together. Separately. Apparently, my dad had a falling out with my mom after finding out she tried to hide some jewelry from him. Jewelry grandma had already sold years ago to bail them out of a financial disaster they never told anyone about. My mom went to stay with some distant cousin in Tennessee. My dad was couch surfing with a guy he used to work with. My sister stayed behind. He said she wanted to be better. I asked her why she came. She hesitated, then said, I think I needed to see for myself that you were okay. Because they still talk about you like you're a problem. And I needed to know that wasn't true. I didn't know what to say to that. There was a part of me that wanted to let her in, let her hold the baby, sit down and talk about everything like sisters should. But a bigger part of me, the one that remembered every message she didn't send, every moment she chose silence, kept the door where it was. I thanked her for telling me. She asked if she could see the baby just once. I told her maybe. One day. Not today. She nodded. She didn't argue. Then she said something I didn't expect. Grandma saved us both. You just noticed first. She turned and walked back down the path into the rain. Didn't ask for money. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Just left. That night, I sat with Grandma in the living room while the baby slept on her chest. I told her what happened word for word. She didn't smile or say I told you so. She just nodded and looked out the window. Then she said, now you see what I've seen for a long time. And now it's your turn to protect what matters. I looked around the room. Toys scattered, folded baby clothes, a pot on the stove. It wasn't glamorous. But it was real. It was safe. It was ours. In the end, my parents lost everything because they didn't know what love really looked like. They used people until there was nothing left. And when the consequences came, they blamed everyone but themselves. But me. I gained a home. A future. And a promise I made to my daughter quietly every night I held her. That she would never have to beg for the kind of love she deserved. Not from me. Not from anyone. Not from anyone. Not from anyone.
He was laughing and joking about how he was only marrying me because it was the right thing to do, and he wasn't sure if he truly loved me. I mean, to be fair, you're not sure if you truly love him either, but the fact that he's like kikiing about this on your wedding day, could we not have figured this out beforehand? Like, everybody's kind of here. We kind of got the dresses and the cakes and the flowers and everything. The flowers just themselves are like $20,000 apparently. Oh God, Lord have mercy. I'm not even you. Like, this is how much flowers cost at a wedding in Ontario unless you do something else. He mentioned that he felt trapped by our family's expectations and didn't want to disappoint them. Ugh. It's not worth it, bestie. It's not. Man, life's too short to be with someone for the rest of your life and not be sure about them. My heart sank. Here I was, thinking we were starting a new chapter of our lives based on love and commitment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like a punch to the gut. I stood there frozen as they continued talking. Okay, so you had moments of doubt too, right? Was that because of how he was treating you or because you just weren't sure about him? I stood there frozen as they continued talking. My husband said he hoped he could grow to love me and that maybe marriage would fix things. Marriage is not a band-aid. A ring is not a shut up. Fix things before you get engaged, not after. The best man didn't seem shocked or surprised, which made me think they'd had this conversation before. Oh, wow. Okay, so everybody knew except you. God. Great, got it. Devastated, I decided to take a moment to myself and process what I'd just heard. I went back to the bridal suite, tears streaming down my face. That's when I saw his phone on the dresser, buzzing with notifications. Oh, he cheating. Oh, he cheating for sure. I know it was wrong, but in my state of shock, I picked it up and unlocked it. What I found next was a complete shock. There were texts from another woman, someone I didn't recognize. Do you guys find it annoying when I try to guess the end of the story? It's so annoying. I'm sorry. I know. But I like to imagine that I'm psychic. I'm not psychic. People are just predictable. I've heard this story before. She was congratulating him on the wedding, but also expressing her frustration that he was going through with it. There were photos, intimate messages, and even plans